but I'll be gone in the afternoon, flying to Mississauga for a workshop on autism next week on Monday and Tuesday. So 2-day little workshop for myself. So I'll be out of town, away in Southern Ontario and Mississauga for a workshop. So again, I'll be gone tomorrow afternoon, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday morning. I should be back by Wednesday afternoon, which means that next week our class on Tuesday will be canceled. Okay, will be canceled. There will be no live class. We'll simply just replay this class, okay, right now, this class, live at this time on Tuesday. So again, you can always go back and review it. Hopefully you'll get the class and students a chance to catch up if needed. Their work period in a way. But we'll play this class again, specifically live Tuesday at this slot. Which means that we'll do a makeup class Friday, December the 9th, okay, in 2 weeks time, okay. So feel free to jot that down and put it in your calendar and make a little note and reminder, but we'll do a makeup class Friday, yes, on Friday, December the 9th at 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock in the morning, Central Time. Okay, that's when we'll do a makeup class. Other than that, everything will be back to normal. There'll be no more class switches after that, unless some traveling or other thing comes up, but that's the plan for next week. Again, reminder, I will send out an email to all the DC, probably today at some point. I'll post it on my Facebook status and news feed so that you can check that out and like it and comment on it. But again, class on Tuesday is canceled. Okay, it's canceled. Any question with that? Any confusion? If you are, again, you know how to get a hold of me. So again, I will remind this and make this little note at the end of today's class, and I will hopefully spread the word so that everyone is aware of what's going on next week for time. So again, next week, Tuesday, class canceled. Thursday, normal as schedule. We'll be here. Hopefully I'll be here unless I'm stuck somewhere, but I'll be here live doing our class as normal. And that's all I have for today in terms of announcements. So let's get to today's class content. Yesterday, we looked at Canada and World War I between 1914 and 1918. So that is done. That is completed. We went over those questions on assignment 2. Again, we kind of zipped through it, but if you have any questions in regards to any of that, again, just let me know. But today, we're starting a new decade, a new topic. Okay, so again, we're moving along, looking at Canadian history in a chronological order since the 1900s, and we'll move all the way towards present day almost, give or take. So we started in the 1900s, we tackled World War I, and now we're moving on to the 1920s and 1930s. This will be our focus for today. Okay, so I call this slide Canada Between the Wars. Okay, Canada Between the Wars. Our main focus is the Great Depression. Okay. So let's get to our learning goals. Again, our learning goals help you to identify what our class objective is, what you are expected to be able to do once today's class is done. Okay, so our learning goals, again, it really links to the Ontario curriculum as I try to pull little tidbits and nuggets out of it and try to plug it into our PLAR class. So, learning goals for today. By the end of today's class, in the next 60 minutes, you will be able to identify the cause of the Great Depression, or understand the cause of the Great Depression, I should say. Determine the lasting impact the Great Depression had on Canada, so the impact or understand the outcome of the Great Depression had on Canada, and to identify the social improvement made by the Temperance Movement. Okay, so looking at who were the Temperance Movement, what their goals were, and how they shaped Canadian society. Okay, so today's focus mainly on economic, based on the Great Depression, and some social movement and reforms by the Temperance Movement and women's rights. these are the key topics that you want to be able to pull out by the end of today's class. So again, to understand or identify the cause of the Great Depression, what caused it in a way, the lasting impact the Great Depression had on Canada or around the world, and look at the social improvement made by the Temperance Movement. What did they want to do? What did they want to achieve? And what was the outcome of their attempt? Okay. Questions on our learning goals. Hopefully it's clear. Hopefully it's precise. You can really understand. Hopefully I try to make these learning goals as simple as possible so that we can achieve our goals. All right, let's get started. Again, feel free to always ask questions, engage, reflect, give feedback, what you're thinking, if you see any connections to your lives, into your community, your family, anything you want to share to class, feel free. This is your class. We'll try to make it fun, engaging as possible, except for me talking all the time. We'd love to see what other would like to hear and based on their perspective and their opinions. So we'll begin with a little background content of what Canada was like in the 1920s. Okay, some understanding Canada in the 1920s. During this time period, we had a new leadership. Our main prime minister was Mackenzie King. There was a guy named Arthur Meighen at the start, but he didn't really last long because he didn't take the oath of acting government. There was a vote of non-confidence, etc., etc. But in general, Mackenzie King was our main prime minister during these 2 decades or so. Okay, Mackenzie King. He's on the $50 bill. 1931, the Statute of Westminster came into play. It's pretty significant in terms of Canadian history, so I thought I'd plug that in there. The Statute of Westminster in 1931 gave Canada control and governance to do what they want, basically, without interference from Britain. So now, in a way, with this act in play, Canada is now recognized as its own distinct nation without interference from Britain. Remember how I always emphasize that before Canada was a part of the British Empire, we were a colony of Britain. With this in play, that's no longer the case. We don't no longer need permission from Britain to change what we want to do. In terms of the economy, this time was good times. We had more goods from the US than Britain. Increase in industry, hydroelectric production, and investment. Everyone wanted to be rich during this time. It was an exciting time in a way. World War I just ended. Everyone wanted to invest, and everyone wanted to be rich. In a way, this was kind of like a new attitude in society. There was growth in the middle class, and there were lots of changes and improvements in schools and other areas and aspects in society as well. But again, things started to progress, things started to look up, things started to look good. It was, in a way, kind of like an exciting time almost, okay, in the 1920s. So I like to sum up the 1920s as called the decade of hope. Okay, like I said, things are turning, things are looking good. Okay, the decade of hope. Okay, 1920s, or the Warren 20s, as some historians like to call it. It was a time of excitement, prosperities, and simply good times. It was good. Like I said, World War I just ended. Family are now back in Canada, happy, and again, excitement, prosperity, and simply good times. It was especially exciting time and good time, the lots of opportunities for the upper and middle class. So if you were an upper and middle class citizen back then, it was good. Things were good. However, not so much for the poor and working class, or the lower class. working class. There was disappointment, uncertainty, and insecurity. They were not sure what the future would bring. So again, we're looking at social hierarchy, can based on where you fall, based on your social economic status. It depends. It could be good times, it could be uncertainty. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Continuing, it was an exciting time for the upper middle class because it was a chance for them to purchase brand new consumer items. It could be a refrigerator, it could be a battery operated radio, electronics, washing machine, and others. Okay, this was exciting times. A lot of new technology came into play, and if they can afford it, or if you can afford it, it was seen as a good time. So now you can see that little link between upper, middle, and working class. Okay, the working class couldn't afford all these fancy new consumer goods, so they didn't really see it as a time of opportunity. Again, it was a period of increase in industry, urbanization. The telephone came into play with Alexander Graham Bell, the telephone, the automobile, which is absolutely huge. We had the Ford line came out with like the T model, I believe. It was the first time that cars had color and other fancy gadgets. Again, the automobile industry during this time period really boomed and it was huge. We can talk about it all day long. It really changed the way things happen. If you had a car back then, you can travel, you can see new places, have opportunities. It reinforced road, construction, traffic laws and signs, really changed the way we live. So again, that's huge, the automobile. The radio, okay? I'm not sure how many people still listen to the radio. I definitely still do here and there, but the radio came into play in the 1920s. Our class here at Wausau is through the radio, so if it wasn't for this, Wausau wouldn't be using the radio to an extent. Okay, so again, a lot of new technology came into play, more electricity, medicine, such as insulin came out. Again, medicine, technology, lots of goods came out in the 1920s. So if you can afford it, it was good. It was exciting. You had new goods, fancy goods. If you can't, that was unfortunate. That was just unfortunate, just the way it was. The stock market also was not a factor. It kept growing and growing, doubling in value. It really opened a lot of eyes, and it had no sign of slowing down. And everyone thought of this as, wow, it was my chance to make some money. Okay, so stock market grew, doubled in value, didn't really slow down. Again, people want to be rich, people wanted to invest, so they went after it. They went after it. Chance for opportunities. However, to sum things all up, Canadian society at this time, more have-nots than haves. Okay, keep that in mind. Okay, even though a lot of this came out, sounds great, not many people can actually afford it in a way. Okay, so more have-nots than haves. Okay, so think of it as a small percentage of Canadians had these items and goods. Okay. So how did the 1920s ended? Okay, so again, like I mentioned, it was time of excitement, good times for some, uh, not so much for others, but the 1920s basically finished how it started. Canada was caught up in a recession, and being modern is not important as having a job, food, and shelter. So basically, the basic needs of living, such as food, clothing, shelter, and a job, uh, it's way more important than having all these fancy technology and goods. Okay, so being modern or keeping up with all the trend is not as important as having a job, food, and shelter. Okay, again, we can still see it in today's society in a way, how people live by this model, but again, just the way it was back in the 1920s. Okay, so that was the 1920s, a short little decade. Uh, Seemed exciting, but in terms of indigenous contents, again, First Nation indigenous, they couldn't afford any of these technologies. They couldn't afford new farming machinery. Some employment in non-average work, such as logging and fishing, came into play as well. So again, not much change as well in terms of indigenous content during this time period. Any questions on the 1920s? So basically, to sum things up, it was exciting for some, not so exciting for others, give or take, depending on your social status or economic status. Moving along to the next decade, 1930s. So we zipped through the 1920s with a couple of slides. And now I'm going to look at Canada in the 1930s. Okay, so understanding Canada in the 1930s. It was, again, a period of social economic shock that left millions unemployed, hungry, and homeless. Okay, so the Great Depression is what I'm talking to. Okay, so what were the factors? What was happening? To get a sense, a little background content, factors that came into play in a way was high taxes, economic dependent on exports from other countries. We had overextending credits, heavy debt loans, ineffective financial regulations, misguided government interventions, and a lot of public panic. So all these factors came into play, and other numerous other factors as well. Uh, in a way, led to the Great Depression almost. Okay, which is our next slide, the Great Depression. The Great Depression, a very big topic, a very important topic when looking at Canadian history during this time period. It was a dark period in Canadian history. It left many lives bruised, broken, and shattered. Okay, so again, very controversial, very dark, not exciting topic. Just like residential school, again, the Great Depression can fall under that category. Again, it can be seen as a dark period in terms of Canadian history. So why was it so dark? Why was it so depressing and sad? Why did it leave so many lives bruised, shattered, and broken? What was the cause? Okay, some questions to think about right now. Okay, what was the cause? What do you think the cause was? What was so dreadful about it? And how did it create so much fear that would haunt people for a lifetime? Okay, so think about that for a moment. Okay, the Great Depression. What do you think caused it? Feel free to jot down some thoughts. Why do you think was so dreadful about it? What was so dreadful about it? And why did it create so much fear that would haunt people for a lifetime? Okay, the Great Depression. The Great Depression. Again, very dark topic in a way. So, The Great Depression, what was it or what caused it? Well, like I mentioned, the stock market grew, especially in the 20s and continuing into the 30s in a way, well, into the late 20s. It doubled in value. It made a lot of people rich and a great deal of money, and it had no sign of slowing down. And again, people saw this and wanted to invest and wanted to get rich, so they bought stocks to invest. So it all took place on October 1929, starting on something known as Black Thursday. Black Thursday. The stock market crashed on October the 24th, 1929, known as Black Thursday. People began to sell all their shares as fast as they could so that they would not lose any more money. But why did it crash? Why did the stock market crash? Uh, some have different opinions on this. Okay, some historians believe this, some historians believe other factors, but in a way, it was basically stocks have been overpriced, or in other words, the price of the share did not reflect the true value of the company. So eventually, it was going to be a bust in a way. A couple days later, 5 days later, known as Black Tuesday, October 29th, 1929, Black Tuesday, the stock market once again crashed, and it had basically started this little domino effect known as the Great Depression. Okay, it left millions of people broke, lost a lot of money, people were laid off of jobs, and people had no jobs. Okay, company went bankrupt. They had to basically sell everything. 1/3 of Canadians lost their jobs. Okay, 1/3. That's a lot in a way. 1/3 lost their jobs. Again, you can see the effects. Okay, so again, think of you being laid off. Think of you having no jobs. Okay, it's pretty scary. How can you eat? How can you support your family? And other factors. Okay, it was not an exciting time. It was scary. It was uncertain. Again, the cause was, again, companies were making more products than people could afford. So again, uh, factories that continues because of World War One saw how well he was doing. So I kept producing and producing more goods and items, but people couldn't afford them. So now we have so much product that no one can buy. So again, everything just came into a bust. Okay. Again, it was all many factors came into play. Timing and place was another factor, but again, the stock market crash led to the Great Depression. Again, millions of people were laid off, had no jobs, companies went bankrupt. 1/3 of Canadians lost their jobs. So in other words, the stock market crash was a symptom of economic instability. Okay, uncertainty, unbalance, unsure of the future. The Great Depression was not the only cause of bad times in Canada during this time period. Farmers. If you're a farmer, you can, in a way, relate. But farmers in the Prairie province, so Manitoba, Saskatchewan, they had a hard time as well. Other countries around the world started to produce more grains than Canada. It was hit the hardest in terms of the Prairie province. We had a severe drought in Western Canada. It means that we had no rain for almost 7 years or a long period of time. So everything became really, really dry, led to dust storms. Oh, and oh boy, that was not just a problem. We had grasshopper. Okay, a grasshopper plague came out of nowhere. This super bug came, ate all the crops, damaged all the crops. So again, that was a factor. So people lost everything. Okay, couldn't have a job. Okay, couldn't make anything on the farmland. We had to rely on luck. Okay, people have had to rely on luck. They couldn't afford fuel. They had to hook up the cars to, or the animals to the cars, known as the Bennett buggies. Basically, no money, no income, couldn't pay bills. Basically, had to like sell homes and land, etc. Again, hard times for the farmers, especially out west in the prairie provinces. So again, the Great Depression wasn't just the only cause. Farmers had a big problem as well. Okay, drought, grasshopper, had to rely on luck. Well, the prairie and western province didn't have all the problems. The effect of the Great Depression can be seen all over Canada. Okay, so we've seen what happened in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, in the western prairie province in terms of farmland, agriculture, and their effect. Again, we just talked about that in the last slide. So now we look at other provinces in Canada and see how the impact of the Great Depression had on everyone else. So in BC, British Columbia, resource-based industries and agriculture dropped, declined. Out east, Newfoundland, well, they were not a part of Canada yet, so let's not worry about those guys over there. Quebec, Ontario, manufacturing sector were hit the hardest. Massive layoffs. Again, people losing jobs. That was the main theme that came out. Income went down by 50%. Oh boy. And unemployed went down by 27%. Some pretty big numbers. Almost half of people lost half their income, and almost 30% had no jobs during this time period. Imagine being jobless and can't do anything to support your family and just have basic living needs. Not fun. Okay? No matter how hard you tried, it affected everywhere in Canada. Okay, everywhere in Canada. But again, dark period affected a lot of people. A lot of people still remember it, especially grandparents and all that. Remember this time period. So how should we remember the Great Depression? Okay, 1930s. Again, we can tackle so much other small events that took place in the Great Depression, but again, that was just a little snapshot, little survey of what took place in the 30s, or led to the 30s because of the Great Depression. There were challenges. Governments even stepped up. Individuals, families, Canadians stepped up, and now we have government relief assistance. Okay, because of all this, we now call upon our Canadian government to do something when a crisis took place. Okay, so now we have relief assistance systems such as welfare and others to support these times. So the 1930s, I like to sum it up as not always about the Great Depression, unemployment, relief line, dust storms, or hobos, but always a story of society's struggles. Okay, the struggles and challenges. Remember how I emphasized that when looking at history, as historians, we have to take into account both sides of the stories, the good and the bad, the positive and negatives, the contributions and the struggles. Okay, so this decade can be seen as struggles, okay, the challenges, obstacles that we had to overcome. Okay, so again, it's not always about these small little factors, but to sum things all up, it's all about how society struggled and how we overcame these factors and what came out of it. Okay. Any questions on the 1930s and the Great Depression? So that was again kind of like our main event for today's class, our main learning goal, talking about the Great Depression, what caused it, what was it, and how it affected Canadians. Okay. So again, so hopefully, once we finish everything, you can go back to our learning goals and make those connections and see if we have achieved those points. So how did the 1930s ended? Well, again, I'm going to wrap this topic up with a question. Okay, I have a question on my screen, and it simply says, how does the Great Depression change the role of how does the Great Depression change the role of government in Canada? Okay, that's the question I posed. How does the Great Depression change the role of government in Canada? Well, to answer that, we now expect our government, like I said, to act, help out when there's a financial crisis in terms of action and intervention. Okay, so again, social welfare as an example. Okay, so when something like this happens, especially nowadays, we expect some help. Okay, in a way, it's out of our control, out of our citizens' control, Canadian people control. So again, we need our government to step up and help us out in a way. So that's the 1930s. We are going to talk about now the social aspects of today's lesson. Okay, women, women's role, the rights, the social aspect. The social and political, I should say, social and political aspect. So again, we briefly touched upon women and women history, the first topic, in terms of how they had limited rights, couldn't vote, they were restricted in the home, they were seen as guardian of the home, the angel in the house, had to cook, clean, do domestic duties, take care of the children, couldn't really work in the public sphere. So things needed to be changed in their point of view. So political concerns of women. Prohibition is one. Okay, prohibition simply means the ban and sale of alcohol consumption. Okay, women didn't like this. They didn't like the drinking that was going on with alcohol and sales. They saw it as corrupted. They saw it as evil and how it really is a bad and negative and how it perpetuated uh, things that they didn't like to see in society back then. Okay, it led to prostitution. It led to homelessness, poverty, and other factors as well. So they didn't really like this. So they wanted to push for prohibition, the ban and sale of alcohol consumption. Well, it didn't really happen because people started to sell and drink alcohol anyways. But the other concern that they want to focus on was the right to vote. Okay, a huge impact. Okay, if they were going to do something the right way, and they needed to have their voice and opinion taken into account. So the right to vote federally and provincially in terms of election. Okay. So these were the two concerns that women wanted to achieve. Again, the ban of alcohol consumption prohibition, that didn't really happen. But they really want to push for the right to vote. Right to vote. Because of all this, certain groups in a lot of major cities, uh, tag team came together, rally. They formed groups, organization known as the Temperance Movement. Say the Temperance Movement. The Temperance Movement. Just to touch again in terms of prohibition, again, they thought alcohol and its sales was believed or abuse of alcohol was the cause of unemployment, disease, prostitution, poverty, immortality for our society. So again, to change all this and to get the right to vote, the temperance movements were a group of women, again, really popular in all major cities. One group that came out was the Women's Christian Temperance Union. Feel free to Google that group, and you can see what they achieved during this time period. But basically, they just wanted to improve Canadian society in their point of view. Okay, they want to change things that would reflect their gender and how we have changed Canadian society as a whole. Social political campaign, they really pressured the government to change laws. Okay, but again, the Canadian government really ignored all their suggestions. So like I said, to really change something, they have to gain the right to vote so that they can take actions in their own way. So again, they didn't really just focus on prohibition, alcohol, but they really wanted to focus on other aspects in society as well. Hospitals, making them better. Schools, prisons, again, just changing Canadian societies in their perspective so that it would create equity and equality for both genders. Uh, Again, I already mentioned that prohibition didn't work. Underground sales, bootleggers, smugglers. But again, always also said that governments seemed to ignore all their suggestions. The only way to improve was to get the right to vote. Okay, gain suffrage. So they held demonstration, collected name on petition, wrote articles, newspaper letters. They did whatever they can to voice their opinions and voices. Again, I truly believe that everyone's voice should have a say. So again, that even includes in our class as well. Everyone's opinion is valid as well. So in the end, to sum things all up, women eventually won the right to vote. Okay, they got it. They got what they wanted, but it took some time. Okay, it took some time. So on my screen and even in the textbook, there's a chart in there. Okay, near the end of this lesson that outlines a little timeline of how women's rights change from decades to decades. So on my screen right now, if you have Smart Bridget, you can note that I have different provinces' name on my screen and different years that women won the right to vote. Okay, it did not all come at once. Again, it took time and it varied from province to province. Okay, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, women out there won the right to vote in 1916. Okay, however, a year later, BC, Ontario won the right to vote in 1917. And it didn't take Nova Scotia, New Brunswick till 1918, PI not till 1922, but Quebec, women in Quebec had to wait till 1940 to be able to vote. Okay, so again, note that different provinces for women want to vote different years. Okay, it took time. Eventually, it all came into place, uh, but it happened. But federally, okay, so that was provincially, but federally, uh, 1917. Okay, it was limited to some, but not until 1918 when almost all were able to vote. Okay, so in 1918, all women can vote federally, but provincially, different years. Why? Why was this a factor? To be honest, I'm not entirely sure. Something that I would like to explore deeper, but it just took place at a slow rate, and eventually it all happened. But when looking at Aboriginal women, okay, Aboriginal women, they couldn't vote until 1960. Okay, 1960. Oh my goodness. Okay, again, you can see discrimination come into play for certain groups. Even racial was a factor. Asian women, even Asian men couldn't vote until the late 1940s. Okay, so again, even though women won the right to vote in all these years, provincially and federally, uh, but not everyone had the equal access. So again, Aboriginal women not until 1960, Asian women, men not until 1940s. So again, discrimination still took into place. But what I really want to emphasize that again, different provinces won the right to vote, different years, and federally not until 1980. Okay, so again, women they eventually achieved their goal, they got what they wanted. So again, now they can start to see some changes that came into play that reflect their perspective. Questions on that? Again, very unique topic. Definitely one of my favorites as well. All right, so that pretty much wraps things up. We're going to spend the next few minutes looking at assignment number 3 questions. Assignment 3 is your last assignment for lesson 1. Hey, look at that. Lesson 1 is now done basically. Okay, lesson 1 is now done, which means that next week, a week today, we'll start lesson 2. Okay, Canada and the Second World War during that period, 1940s and 50s. So assignment 3, just simply more questions, but same format. Again, always refer to your success criteria in terms of how you're able to answer all these questions. So question 1, name 3 items after invention that people started to acquire in the 1930s. Again, lots, cars, radio, medicine, insulin, okay? Question 2, what happened to cause the Great Depression? So what caused the Great Depression? And do you think, oh, I love this question, do you think another Great Depression can happen? Why or why not? So what do you think? Okay. Okay, now what I think, what do you think? Okay. And explain why. Okay. What do you think? Do you think another one can happen? So what was the Great Depression? What happened? What caused it? And do you think another one could happen today? Why? Why not? It could simply be yes, no, because. Okay. Show me your thinking. Okay. I love these questions because you're not just telling me facts and details, but it shows me your critical thinking. Okay. Again, there's no right or wrong answer, but it demonstrates your thinking. You could be like yes because of this factor, this reason, or no because of this factor, this reason. Okay. So again, show me your thinking. Okay. Critical thinking. Think about it. Okay. Again, not what I think. It's all about what do you think. Okay. Support your thinking, back it up, justify it, give reason. Next question. Describe the challenges for farmers. So go back to that farming slide on that page in terms of the Great Depression. So again, had to lie in luck, grasshopper, had to hook up the animals to cars, couldn't afford fuel, other country producing more grains, etc. That's how the 4 marks. Next question is a little charts. It looks something like this. For this question, you can use jot notes. That's okay. But basically, you're just comparing gender roles in terms of different categories. Education. So could women go to school? Could men go to school? Could women go to university? Could men go to university? Stuff like that. Jobs, employment. What kind of jobs do women had to do in the early 1900s? Family, children, domestic duties. What kind of jobs the men can do? Basically anything they want. Engineering, law school, lawyer, doctor. And the last category was family roles. What were women expected to do for the family role? Again, cook, clean, take care of the children. And what were men required to do? Support the family basically with their income. Okay, so page 8 in your textbook really helps for this. Hopefully you're not confused with this. And if you are, just let me know and I will clarify and point you in the right direction. 5. What was the point base of the temperance movements? What did they focus on? 6. Why did women feel it was important for them to get to votes? Okay. So in other words, what did the government do? Okay, what did the government do when all their suggestions came into play? They simply ignored all their suggestions. Okay. 7. Describe how women acquired the right to vote provincially compared to federally. Okay. In other words, what did they actually do? Okay. Held demonstrations, collected name on petition, and look at the years in terms of provincially and federally. Were they the same? Were they different? What year did they win? Okay, compare it. Okay, compare. Look at the years in terms of provincially and federally and compare. Okay, kind of like a little comparing activity. And lastly, it's not a huge essay, but you're basically just commenting on women rights today compared to back then in the early 1900s. Talk about education, employment, and family role. Okay, don't overthink it. Basically, you already have the tools and the knowledge to answer these questions, but you're comparing. Okay, basically what you see today in terms of society and in your community, what were women required to do today compared to back then? Okay, was it the same? Was it different? Any restrictions, limitations? Think about it, okay? Give some examples of what you see in terms of your family, okay? Can women go to school nowadays? I think so. What kind of jobs can women do now today? Anything they want, basically. Family roles could be the same, could be different. Talk about it, touch on it, give some examples, okay? So that right there, class, is lesson number 1. It is done. That is assignment number 3 questions. Lots of questions, but same format. Again, before we wrap things up, happy Thanksgiving, American Thanksgiving to all those down there and are celebrating.